People watching, but we're alone now, and I'm singing this song to you. I know your image of me is what I hope to be. I've treated you unkindly, but darling, can't you see? There's no one more important to me. Darling, can't you please see through me? 'Cause we're alone now, and I'm singing this song to you. You taught me precious secrets of the truth.
Recording in progress.
You came out in front and I was hiding. But now I'm so much better. And if my words don't come together, listen to the melody, 'cause my love is I love you in the place where there's no space and time. I love you for my life, you are a friend of mine. Remember when we were together? We were alone and I was singing this song to you. But I love you in a place where there's no space and time. I love you for my life, you are a friend of mine. And when my life is over, remember when we were together? We were alone and I was singing this song for you. We were alone and I was singing this song for you. We were alone and I was singing my song. Singing this song for you.
It is.
Gee, but I hate to go home alone. When I
Oh, it's the grass man to come and collect my money.
there's just a bed and a chair to greet me. Nobody's waiting there with a smile. I get so lonesome, oh so lonesome. A home sweet home to most folks is a place for which they long. Home sweet home don't mean a thing. No, to me it's just a song. Don't even know anyone to phone. I'm lonesome, gee, but I hate to go home alone. Home sweet home to most folks is a place for which they long. A home sweet home don't mean a thing. No, to me it's just a
I'm glad you tell
song.
me.
Don't even know anyone to phone. I'm lonesome, gee, but I hate to. Gee, but I hate to. Gee, but I hate to go home alone. From this valley, they say you are going. We will miss your bright eyes and sweet smile. For they say you are taking the sunshine, which has brightened our pathway. Oh, come and sit by my side if you love me. Do not hasten to bid me adieu, but remember the rain, river valley, and the girl who has loved you so true.
Recording in progress.
God, the valley. Oh, how long and sad it will be. I think of the fun you are breaking, and the grief you are causing. I have promised you, darling, that will a word from my lips cause you pain, and my life it will be yours forever. If you would love me again. Come and sit by my side if you love me. Do not hasten.
So it's just
Pretty pictures, yeah.
and then people are on camera.
Yeah. Let's see who else. You might know or
Right.
not.
But
All right. Are you still in the bathroom for a minute? Because
I'll be in and out, but
Okay. No, I could take a shower. I can take a shower.
That has loved you so true.
yeah.
There's a reason, something they're trying to hide between every line. There's a meaning, something you'll never find. You can try a little harder. You can try a little harder. You can try a little harder than you may see. These eyes the dream to be. These eyes can see what's going on. Inside every man, there's an anger and a feel of what may come all over the land. They're burning candles, but you're holding the only one. You can try a little harder. You can try a little harder. You can try a little harder, and you may see. These eyes will cross. These eyes will see what's going on. They say everything can be replaced. They say every distance is up here. So I remember everything of every man who put me here. I see my life from shine from the western sea. They say every man needs protection. They say every man must fall. Oh, where I see my reflection somewhere inside the wall. I see my life come shine from the western You understand the man in the lonely crowd. Man said he's not to blame. All day long I hear him hollering so loud. Just crying out that he's not to blame. My light will shine from the western. I shall be
People get ready. There's a train a-coming. You don't need no baggage. You just get on board. All you need is space to the humming. You don't need no ticket. You just thank the Lord. Yeah, yeah. People get ready for the train to passengers from coast to coast. Faith is the key, open the doors and board them. There's room for all of the love and honesty. Yeah, yeah. Now there ain't no room for the hopeless sinner who's hard on mankind just to save his own. Have pity on those whose chances are thinner, 'cause there's no hiding place from the king of stone. Oh, people get ready, there's a train coming. You don't need no baggage, you just get on board on your knees. It's faith to hear these souls are humping. You don't need no ticket, you just thank the Lord, yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm getting ready. I'm ready.
We have no,
I'm getting ready.
I've made up my mind to live in memories of the lonesome time. It's useless to say, so I'll just live my life in dreams of yesterday. Those happy hours that we once knew, though long ago, they still make me blue. They say that time heals a broken heart, but time has stood still since we've been apart. I made up my mind to live in memories of the lonesome time. It's useless to say, so I'll just live my life in dreams of yesterdays. Those happy hours that we once knew, oh, long ago, still make me
Said I made up my mind to live in memory of the lonesome time. Sing the song, children. I can't stop wanting you. It's useless to say, so I'll just live my life of dreams of yesterday.
How are you? Good to see you. Good to see you. Yes, it's been a while. A couple years.
I was standing by my window on one cold and cloudy day when I saw that hearse come rolling for to carry my mother away. Will the circle be unbroken by and by, Lord, by and by? There's a better home waiting in the sky, Lord, in the sky.
I said to that undertaker, please drive slow.
hymns of faith that made us strong, the ones that Mother Maybach taught us, hear the angels sing along. Will a circle be unbroken by and by, Lord, by and by? There's a letter on the way in the sky, Lord, in the sky. Will a circle be unbroken by and by, Lord, by and by? There's a letter on the way. In the sky, Lord, in the I've been so many places in my life and time. I've sung a lot of songs, I've made some bad rhymes. I've acted out my love in stages with 10,000 people watching. But we're alone now and I'm singing this song to you. I know your image of me is what I hope to be. I've treated you unkindly, but darling, can't you see? There's no one more important to me. Darling, can't you please see through me? 'Cause we're alone now and I'm singing this song to you. You taught me precious secrets of the truth, withholding nothing. You came out in front and I was hiding. But now I'm so much better, and if my words don't come together, listen to the melody, 'cause my love in their hiding. I love you in a place where there's no space and time. I love you for my life, you are a friend of mine. And when my life is over, remember when we were together. We were alone and I was singing this song to you. But I love you in a place where there's no space and time. I love you for my life, you are a friend of mine. And when my life is over, remember when we were together. We were alone and I was singing this song for you. We were alone and I was singing this song for you. We were alone and I was singing my song. Singing this song for you.
You're no good, heartbreaker. You're a liar and you're a cheat. And I don't know why I let you do these things to me. My friends keep telling me that you ain't no good. Oh, but they don't know that I'd leave you if I could. I guess I'm uptight and I'm stuck like glue. 'Cause I ain't never, no, loved a man the way that I love you. Some time ago I thought you had run out of food, but I was so wrong. You got one that you'll never lose. The way you treat me is a shame. How could you hurt me so bad? Baby, you know that I'm the best thing that you ever had. Kiss me once again. Don't you never, never say that we're through. 'Cause I ain't never, never, no, loved a man the way that I love you. I can't sleep at night, and I can't eat a bite. I guess I'll never be free since you got your hooks in me. Oh, yeah, yeah. I ain't never loved a man. I ain't never loved a man, baby. Ain't never had a man that hurt me so bad. No, but this is what I'm gonna do about it.
Good morning. Good morning. We'd like to thank y'all for coming to Mr. Sobol Memorial. We thank all for y'all traveling grace. My name is Gary Duncan. I have a little something to say about my icon. Mr. Sobol was a man. He had great love for everyone. He gave up a profitable career to fight for the civil right, for unfortunate people that couldn't afford a lawyer to fight for their rights. And he was a man that he didn't brag or boast about what he did or anything else like that. He was a man, he just concerned about the right of other people. And I thank God for Mr. Sobol, and I wish this country would have a lot more Mr. Sobol, and he's a big void in my life. And I just pray and trust God that God bless this United States to have a lot more of Mr. Sobol. And I loved him dearly, and I miss him. So he's my icon, and I see all y'all that's gathered here. Y'all thought a lot of him also. So we just gonna go on and get the program started, because I could have a lot to say about him, because you know he was a brave man. He endured a lot for civil rights. He went through a lot, and they have a book out, Deep Delta Justice, and they have a documentary out, Crime on the Bayou. And I've been getting a lot of recognition from it, but I think all that should go to Mr. Sobol. He deserves it all. It should be a statue somewhere for Mr. Sobol, because Mr. Sobol could have been just what he wanted to be. He could have been some politician, or a judge, or whatever, because he was that brilliant, and he could have did this. So I thank God for Mr. Sobol and his family. And I thank God for each and one of y'all coming here.
Hi, I'm Matthew Van Meter. I wrote Deep Delta Justice, which mostly meant I spent about 5 years reading Richard Sobol's office memos. And I think the only thing I can say that I haven't said in the book, or hasn't been said better by Gary and some of the other folks who will be speaking, is that after having spent years reading Richard Sobol's interoffice, memoranda, that was quite enough to give me a really deep respect for his humanity, his dedication, and his fierce defense of everybody's rights, whoever they are. So we have a series of 10 speakers. We're going to start with a recorded remembrance by George Cooper. George is a lawyer, lifelong friend of Richard's. He wasn't able to be here today. Seems like we're having some technical difficulties.
I think I knew Richard longer than almost anyone here. We met in the early 1960s when we both graduated from law school and came to Washington to join law firms. That was the time when JFK was just inaugurated, and Washington had a kind of glamour to it, as if just by being there, you were part of Kennedy's new frontier. But we soon learned that working for a major law firm was not the way to do what you could for your country, as JFK famously asked of us in his inaugural address. It wasn't that the law firms didn't let us do pro bono work. They did allow some of it, but often some of it was more pro malo. For example, Richard told me stories of how he was asked to find witnesses, expert witnesses for tobacco companies who would testify that smoking was good for you. You couldn't pay him enough to do that. In the summer of 1965, when the LCDC, an offshoot of the ACLU, put out requests for lawyers to go south to help with the civil rights movement, we both jumped at the chance. It was an exciting opportunity for us, and it really defined our futures. Within a year, neither one of us was any longer working at a law firm. Richard had gone off to New Orleans, where he was running full-time, running an LCDC office in New Orleans, and I had gone off to become a law professor. But the civil rights opportunities were still very much with us. And when Richard asked if I could help him handle some major Title VII cases, I jumped at the chance. And we worked very hard together on cases against the Crown Auerbach paper mill in Bogalusa, Louisiana. As we worked on this project, the Beatles came out with the Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, and we listened to that over and over as we worked on our cases and our briefs. And we had the idea, I think, in our heads that we were being as creative with the law as the Beatles were with their music. After that, our professional lives diverged. We were still close, and he remained forever my friend, my very close friend. But our lives diverged. He flirted with academia as I had done, but it was not for him. I have no doubt he could have been a fabulous law professor, but that was not all he wanted. Richard was a great lawyer, but beyond that, he was also a warrior. He stayed with it and devoted his life to pursuing the cause of justice. I'm proud to consider Richard my friend and colleague, and I'm also proud to be given the opportunity to honor him at this event. Thank you for that.
I'm gonna read a scripture out of the Bible, Psalms 27, starting at the second verse. When evildoers close in on me to devour me, it is my enemy, my assailant, who stumble and fall. If an army should encamp against me, my heart would feel no fear. If all men should fall upon me, even then I should be undismayed. In this month.
Next up, we have remembrances by Valeria Hicks and Barbara Hicks Collins. The Hicks family are champions of the rights of Black people in Bogalusa, Louisiana, and they were lifelong friends of Richard Sobol.
I'm going to say good morning. I guess it's still morning. I'm Robert Hicks' wife, and Dick was our friend. We depended on Dick so much, and we're just so happy to be here today to let everybody know how we cared for Dick. We really felt that Dick was a part of our family. That's how we felt about him. He explained things to us and told us the things that we should do and the things that we shouldn't do. And he was very patient. Couple of times he had to kind of let me know that he was the lawyer. We was at court, and then he brought us in to meet the judge. And I told the judge that I was very unhappy with him because he was the one who told me to send my children to the white school, and I did. And they were fighting my children. It was only about 6 of them. I had 2 over there. And Dick, when we got out, Dick said, Jackie, I'm the lawyer. Do you know that you're not supposed to talk to the judge? I said, but those were my children. And I said, every time my phone would ring, my heart would be in my mouth. And I told the judge, I said, you told me to send them over there. I said, and if you hadn't told me to send them, I wouldn't have sent them. When we got out, Dick said, Jackie, you know, you're not supposed to talk to the judge. I'm the lawyer. I said, well, and he said, but I want you to know that you did a hell of a job with him, because I was fussing at that judge. And, you know, that's the privilege I had. The lawyer couldn't fuss at him, but I fussed and told him, you told me to send my children over there. But we loved Dick. He was just part of our family. He would sit down and explain things to us, tell us what we should do and what we shouldn't do. And he was very patient. Well, as you can see, I'm that mother, that black mother, when you start picking on those children, you gotta fight. But we just thank you so much for allowing us to be here, because we want everybody to know how we love Dick. We felt like he was part of our family. Thank you. I'm Barbara Hicks Collins, and I too am from Bogalusa. I'm the daughter of the late civil rights leader, Robert Bob Hicks in Bogalusa, and you just heard my mom. She was, she is what she is, and everybody understands that. We came from a civil rights family. So everybody in our family, all the siblings and my parents were active. In Bogalusa, there were no Black attorneys. And so as a civil rights movement began to progress, we went to New Orleans, got Collins, Douglas, and Eli to work, to represent us. And Dick came, okay, let me explain this about Dick. Everybody in Bogalusa called Richard Barry Sobol, Dick Sobol. So when he came down with Collins, Douglas, and Eli, and there were so many, Bogalusa was a hot spot at that time. And so they sent him down to represent all of the cases that was in violation of the 1964 Civil Rights Act. And so that was our connection with Dick Sobol. I want to mention I want to make sure that everybody understood that Dick Sobol knew that he was in danger when he came to Bogalusa. He knew that he could be killed. Just like all the people of color knew what we were up against. Bogalusa was called Klanstown, USA, because they had the largest percentage of Ku Klux Klans in that area. And so when civil rights workers and lawyers like Dick came down to represent us, then their lives was just as threatened as our lives. But we, with the Deacons for Defense and Justice, that's a group of men who protected lawyers, civil rights workers,
doctors that came down to help us with our fight. They also protected the leaders like our house, the Hicks House, and Gail Jenkins, RT, A.Z. Young. So we made sure that Dick Sobol was protected. The deacons would get him from the causeway, bring him to Bogalusa, and then they would bring him back. He was protected as long as he was there. That's what we did because we love Dick. Now, the last thing I have to say, I know I went on my 2 minutes, but the last thing I have to say is this. Richard Gary Sobel was feared by the whites in Bogalusa, but he was loved by the blacks of Bogalusa. Thank you.
Next, we have a remembrance from Johnny Temple. Johnny Temple is the son of Ralph Temple, and Ralph and Richard left the Washington, D.C. law firm of Arnold and Porter in the 1960s to become civil rights lawyers at the same time.
Can you see and hear me? Can someone let me know if they can see me? Can you see me now?
We can hear you.
Okay, well, I will, should I wait for the video? Okay, that's fine if you can't see me. I'm Johnny Temple, and I'm...
For example,
Is someone talking?
I'm legally blind, so I can't see stuff at a normal. I can see this.
All right, well, shall I just proceed without the video?
Go ahead, we can hear you fine.
Okay, wonderful.
Yeah,
I'm Johnny Temple, and I'm very honored to be here today to say a few words about Richard. I knew Richard from a very young age, and I was also lucky to have his son Zachary as a friend and classmate at Georgetown Day School in Washington, D.C. I'm still jealous of Zachary's Beatles album collection, which was unlike any record collection I've seen before or since. I'm a musician, and yes, I still feel my envy. And I was also absolutely thrilled to hear from George Cooper that the Beatles were an influence on Richard's incredible civil rights work.
Anyway, so there's all kinds of technical stuff. The two main things that I use are this and this. But then
Although I knew Richard basically my whole life, I speak today as a stand-in for my father, Ralph Temple, who died in 2011, 48 years into his relationship with Richard. They had met in 1963 when Richard was a young new associate at the law firm of Arnold, Fortis and Porter in Washington, D.C. Both Richard and my dad were eager to put their legal skills to work on behalf of civil rights. But that is not at all what they had been hired to do at Arnold, Fortis and Porter.
the opposite end of this area.
When they expressed interest in doing pro bono civil rights work on behalf of the law firm, they were given the green light, as long as they did their work at night and on weekends, which is a perfect example of the benevolence of large law firms.
Okay, well, I'm happy to meet you.
Soon after Richard's arrival to Arnold, Fortis and Porter, he and my dad were doing pro bono work with the Congress of Racial Equality, representing a black man named Clarence Butler, who had been arrested and prosecuted for allegedly making a false accusation of police brutality. This prosecution, unsurprisingly, was total racist bullshit, and Richard and my father kept battling all the way from the DC courts to the United States Court of Appeals, which finally threw out Clarence Butler's conviction and sentence. In the following few years, Richard and my father both traveled to the South for important, courageous, and risky civil rights work at such a key historical moment. Their work together very early in their legal careers helped to cement their mutual commitment to racial justice. They were major inspirations for one another, so that beyond enjoying such a tight friendship over the decades that they would travel to be together, they both felt indebted to each other for the phenomenal work that they were able to do. They were fighters, as George Cooper said, warriors, and their work was heroic. Both of them put themselves at great risk of violence along the way, as Barbara Hicks Collins so poignantly explained a few minutes ago. And Richard continued to do such crucial and often thankless work for so many years. There are many people, including good-hearted, right-thinking people, who didn't realize how pervasive the problem of police brutality against African Americans was until after George Floyd was murdered in May 2020. I find it awe-inspiring that Richard and my father as well were challenging police brutality together nearly 60 years ago, and that's because heroes often arrive early. Thank you.
Remembrance previously recorded by Lewis F. Douglas. Lewis is the son of Niels Douglas, who was an important civil rights lawyer in the city and a longtime friend of Richard Sobol's.
Everyone, it's my distinct pleasure to be here with you to honor one of the most successful civil rights lawyers of our time, Richard Sobol. Greetings, Joanna and Ann Sobol. Greetings also to Garrett Duncan and our other MC, Matthew Van Meter. My name is Lewis Douglas. I'm the youngest son of Niels Douglas. My clearest memories of Richard Sobol are from when he and my father's running days in 1974. I was about 8 years old at the time, and they were both avid runners. They would run all over the city, and people would see them running all over
Greetings,
town.
everyone.
Tease me
It's
that
my
they saw my
distinct pleasure
dad
to be
running
here
with these
with
short
you
shorts and a
to honor
ponytail.
one of the most successful civil rights lawyers of our time.
You didn't have the Richard Sobol. Greetings, Joanna and Ann Sobol. Greetings also to Garrett Duncan and our other MC, Matthew Van Meter. My name is Lewis Douglas. I'm the youngest son of Niels Douglas. My clearest memories of Richard Sobol are from when he and my father's running days in 1974. I was about 8 years old at the time, and they were both avid runners. They would run all over the city, and people would see them running all over town and tease me that they saw my dad running with these short shorts and a ponytail. Well, I was fine because you didn't have the Nike apparel that you do today, and that was all they had. They wore what they had. On weekdays after work, their treks would begin at the law offices to downtown New Orleans, and they would run some circuitous route to our home in Pontchartrain Park. And those would be considered as training runs for their marathons. The catch of it is that they would run in the New Orleans heat and then sit down at the dinner table to eat with us. I didn't mind. I thought it was pretty cool. They were also avid readers, and as an 8-year-old, I idolized them. I knew that their work was important, and I knew that they were both very successful. I wanted to be like them. My dad had a great affinity for Richard, and he would say very quickly to anyone that he thought Richard was brilliant. In 1967, my father filed Parsons v. Kaiser's aluminum case, a case that Richard would join him on and revive back to judgment. It was an employment discrimination suit. And in 1974, when Richard moved back, Niels had just lost the case at trial. But with the quiet help of Richard and Ann Sobol, the case would be revived through a series of hearings and motions and appeals. In a short 11 years from that time period, They would take Kaiser to a judgment for $3.5 million for a class action suit on behalf of Paris Parsons and the Black employees of Kaiser Aluminum. That plant would later shut down. It took a total of 18 years to win that suit. Richard said this of my father, and I have to say it of him, especially in light of that case. Richard Sobol was the model of hard work, believing in something important, and follow through. He worked hard and expected the best of everyone around him. Richard moved to New Orleans in July of 1966, and of this move, he said, "In Louisiana, there are people who need me there, and they depend on my work. Whether I did it and did it quickly and successfully meant the difference between jail or not jail, integrated or segregated education, fair or discriminatory employment practices, the right to demonstrate or the denial of that right, access to public accommodations or the denial of that access, the right to vote or tricks to nullify that right, and so on." At the same time, on a social level, he said, "I was welcomed into the lives and homes of Southern Black people of various incomes. I learned how families far different from my own lived, and I developed several lifelong friendships of a sort that come from shared struggle and mutual reliance. In particular," he said, "I'm thinking of my friendships with Lolis Eli, Nils Douglas, Gary Duncan, Bob Hicks, and Gail Jenkins. I can say I've never admired another man more than my own father, and I can say that he never admired another man more than Richard Sobol. It was a pleasure sharing this time to honor the life and legacy of Richard Sobol."
The next speaker, Lolis Eric Eli, is the son of Lolis Edward Eli. In addition to the many cases that they fought together, Lolis, Edward, and Richard were in and out of each other's houses on a regular basis, listening to music, drinking wine, and talking politics. And they remained lifelong friends.
When Richard Sobol came to New Orleans, he worked with my father's law firm, Collins, Douglas, and Eli. My father died in 2017, so I'm speaking now as best I can for him. I knew Richard less through his cases and more through my father's friendship with him, and perhaps less through what my father said about those cases than through what he said as criticism of other lawyers who claimed to fight for civil rights, whose work was absent, whose priorities were suspect. I studied one case in which Richard was involved, the lawsuit against Crown Zellerback, a Bogalusa paper mill. Donald Mintz, a candidate for mayor of New Orleans at the time, was campaigning on his long commitment to civil rights. Nils Douglas, my father's law partner and another great friend of Richard Sobol, gave me a copy of the file showing Donald Mintz as one of the lawyers for Crown Zellerback. That's one of the things that distinguished Richard Sobol. He was never a lawyer for the other side. Then there was a time in 1972 when Watergate was all over the front page. That's when, according to my father's telling, Richard Nixon began prosecuting welfare recipients in an effort to get his own crimes off of the front page and out of the headlines. Annie Sobol reminded me of the tales of those cases that, as a 10-year-old boy, I knew nothing about. Richard successfully argued that the prosecution was using its challenges to exclude Black jurors. Ultimately, the prosecutions were unsuccessful. I mention these cases, I suppose, to give you some sense of the intellectual basis of the friendship between my father and Richard. But is there ever really an intellectual basis for friendship? Isn't it always based on shared values and shared perspectives and shared good times, even among the hard fights? I wasn't there when Richard, my father, fought in the courts by day and listened to jazz in the clubs by night. But I was very much there in the 1980s and 90s and 2000s when those good times resonated in lasting friendship and shared memories of battles won and rights secured.
Next speaker is David Dennis. At Richard's instigation, Dave Dennis went to the University of Michigan Law School when Richard taught there. When Dave graduated, he returned to New Orleans and was a partner at Eli, Sobol, Strickler, and Dennis.
Good morning, Reverend. It's in one way, it's a pleasure to be here to speak on behalf of family and other people about Richard Sobol. I first met Richard Sobol in 1966 when I came down to New Orleans from Jackson, Mississippi, from working the movement there to join up with Richard Haley and the development of the Southern Regional Office for the Congress of Racial Equality. And at that time, Richard Sobol was with Eli and Bob Collins and here. And so what happened is that my first thing happened was getting Richard experience was that the country had started drafting civil rights workers across the country as it sent them to the Vietnam War. And so I had decided that I wasn't going to go, so I filed for a CO exemption. And so I had to go to, so here was Richard. So they were going to try to, Richard intervened into that draft and found a way to get me where it was not drafted in service. The second encounter was along the way, other than the cases, was getting me into law school, as we just mentioned it. So Richard made a deal with me. I had no really intention of going to law school. So Richard kept talking to me about going to law school. So he made a deal. He said, if you got full scholarship to go to University of Michigan. If you go, I'll go there now teach for a year if you agree to go to University of Michigan. So I did. Of course, I stayed for the 3 years, but Richard Sobol stayed on one semester. He came back. And I don't blame him for that. So when I came back, I finished law school at the University of Michigan. I came back to the immediate part of a distinguished law firm of Eli, Sobol, Strickler, Bronstein. And so then Richard intervened again to sort of save my life. So the first thing I did was came in, I got involved with a reapportionment case we're working on. And I was doing research around that. So I really got into it, and these distinguished lawyers and everybody. So one day Richard comes in, he says, okay, this looks good, him and Lotus. And they said, okay, how you doing in your preparation for the bar? And so I said, when is the bar? They said, oh my God, he hasn't been working on the bar. So he says 2 weeks from now, you got to the bar. So it's between Richard and Eli, who really, Lotus, who really got me where the fact is I was able to pass the bar. But then what happened is that immediately after that, was that they forgot something, and that is that I had still pending, I had done some stuff. I've been arrested over 30 times in the civil rights movement days. So you got all this stuff there. So I've got to clear a lot of this stuff up. So it's Richard who got intervened there again and got most of those cleared up so that I could be able to be sworn into the bar. Then my first case was one. So we were representing the New Orleans Mardi Gras Indians. And so they got into a thing with the police on St. Joseph night. And so they had been, a bunch of them had been arrested. So they told me, go in, all you have to do, here's the motions you filed, and just enter a plea of not guilty. That's all you got to do. Things cool. I said, fine. So I go, of course, that's what all happened there. Police officers slapped one of the guys from the Mardi Gras Indians group. Of course, it broke out this big fight in the courtroom. And here I am and so the judge says, Who's representing these people? And I raised up my hand. He said, if you don't stop them, we'll hold you in contempt of court. I'm like, what? And so I'll go right over. As soon as I run over, one of the people pushed me over to and stuff, fall over the thing. And so the judge said, I'm mad. Now the judge says, are you going to stop this? I said, why don't you get down here and stop it? Okay. So I had my one phone call. So, so I called and Lolis and Richard on the phone said, all you had to do. Right, okay. So anyway, that led into years of hard work with one of the greatest law firms and great people. So I had the opportunity, not only being Richard's friend, but I was a student that studied under him, worked under him, worked with him, and learned a lot about not only just about a law, but about life and what it means to make sacrifices and do what's good for the country. So it's really, he stayed part of my life one way or the other, in and out as the years passed by until his death. And he always would be a part of my life. And it's an honor to be here. And I love you, Richard. Thanks a lot.
Next speaker is Ernest Lake Jones. Ernest Jones was a law partner of Lolis Eli's for many years, Lolis Edward Eli's. He knew both men well, Lolis and Richard, and we're happy to have him here today.
Hello. I was not an early friend of Richard Sobol. I came to know him by reputation as a training lawyer in the Reginald Heber Smith Fellowship Program. But his reputation for legal excellence was known even to us few students who were training to become poverty lawyers, whatever that means. When I came to New Orleans, I started to work in the legal services field. And when I lost my first job as a lawyer, because I had opted to represent the Black Panther Party in a criminal case in the city, I began to know Richard Sobol, the man. When my colleague Bob Glass and I were at a crisis moment, Richard Sobol volunteered to use his personal relationships to secure for us a small bit of funding that was critical to our being able to continue the work that we were doing. We started a law firm then modeled after Collins, Douglas, and Eli. And I began to meet folks who were working in the civil rights era. I have to call to account my friend's memory, Dave Nennis. When Dave was being admitted to the bar, the Supreme Court of Louisiana said, well, we understand an arrest or two for the civil rights movement, but Dave, it wasn't 30, it was 50. And I was called to help him get admitted to the bar. My West African ancestors often said and told their children that no man is dead until his name is no longer spoken. That we're not truly gone until we disappear from the memories of those whom we have touched. Well, as long as lawyers black or white, speak of the sacrifices for justice, and speak of professionalism in the pursuit of what is right, as long as Black lawyers speak of those who teach by example, and lawyers remember the time when there was a need for the vision of Black lawyers being able to exercise their skills in Southern courtrooms without fear. For so long as that discussion is held, the name of Richard Sobol will be spoken on this earth.
Next, we have a remembrance from Nancy Duff Campbell. Nancy, herself a lawyer, is also Michael Trister's wife. For many years, Michael and Richard had a respected civil rights and labor practice in Washington, D.C., and they were lifelong friends.
I knew of Richard before I knew him. A classmate of mine was a law student intern at LCDC in Louisiana in 1966, the same summer that I was a law student intern at the Congress of Racial Equality in New York. When we returned to school in the fall, we traded stories about our experiences and our bosses, Richard Sobol and Carl Racklin. But I didn't actually meet Richard until after my future husband, Mike Trister, began working with him at the Washington Research Project in 1970. Mike and Richard knew each other from their parallel civil rights work in Louisiana and Mississippi. This included Richard's work on the Fifth Circuit case in which Mike and his fellow faculty member, George Strickler, successfully challenged the attempt by the University of Mississippi to fire them for working on civil rights cases. At the Washington Research Project, Richard and Mike worked together on Title VII and other cases, some of which they had begun in the South and weren't resolved until years later. Annie and I entered the picture in the early 70s, and we all became good friends. In 1976, Richard and Mike formed a civil rights firm in DC, Sobol and Trister, where they practiced law together for over 10 years. Mixing in paying clients with pro bono ones, Richard represented his brother-in-law, the actor George Siegel, negotiating Hollywood contracts for him. The first time Mike met George, he appeared at the firm when Richard wasn't there. Perhaps skeptical that civil rights work could support a real law firm, he said to Mike, "So there really is a Trister?" By then, I was at the National Women's Law Center, where we were relying on Richard's and George Cooper's work on testing and seniority in our Title VII cases. When Mike died in 2018, Richard reflected on their 50-year friendship and practice of law together, stating that they never had a cross word. There were reasons for this. Both Richard and Mike were passionate about the work they did and the clients they represented. Both set high standards for themselves and for others. Truth be told, they didn't suffer fools gladly, but at least they agreed on who the fools were. They were true partners, though when it came to fun, Richard definitely took the lead. Richard and Annie and Mike and I shared many happy times together in DC, New Orleans, the Adirondacks, Costa Rica, and California. Richard didn't just introduce Mike and me to Jazz Fest. He gave us copies of the cubes, highlighting the artists we must see. In later life, when Mike, Annie, and I became birders, Richard didn't share our passion, but he gamely joined our excursions. And he knew more about birds than he let on, as he demonstrated in a delightful birder's love poem he wrote for Annie on Valentine's Day. Richard gave so much to so many, and I am so glad to have had him as my friend.
Also a lawyer, Albert was friends with Richard from the 1970s in New Orleans.
Good morning, everyone. I first met Richard, I believe it was in 1972, which would have been 50 years ago, when he was introduced to me by our mutual friend, David McBurnett. At the time, I had just started law school, and like most first or second year law students, I was going to save the world. Richard never really talked much about his work. We all talked pleasantries and different things besides the law. And at the time, I didn't realize what an effect Richard was having on the lives of so many people. Over my course of 50 years of practicing law, I've hopefully helped a few people. But Richard, in his work, helped hundreds of thousands of people. There's hundreds of thousands of people who have a better life because of Richard's work. And I'm just proud to have been his friend, and just consider myself lucky to have known Richard. Thank you.
Next is Patty Ingold. Patty and her husband V were an important part of Richard's social circle, and over the years, they came to treat each other as family.
Good morning, everyone. Well, I'm very honored to be asked to share my and my husband's memories of Richard with all of you. Richard and Ann have been our close friends for over 40 years. In the 80s, we had crawfish boils and boat rides on Bayou Liberty. One of those was a party for Jazz Fest staff. Some of them took the boat for a ride. V and I, Richard and Annie, didn't go on that boat ride, but we learned afterwards that several of the girls were sunning topless on the front of the boat. That must have gotten a lot of attention by the other boaters and the neighbors. One time, Richard and V went fishing on Bayou Liberty, and they caught some small trout. Richard was so happy at their success that he wanted to keep them to cook. V knew that would be bending the law because they were too small, and convinced him that they should throw them back. We visited them at their lovely cottage in Maine, where we watched lobster boats set their traps and saw the beautiful sunsets. One day, we paddled to a little restaurant next to a large creek to have a lobster roll. A lobster roll for lunch. After checking the tides, we had it perfectly timed to see the 11-foot tide change from outgoing to incoming while we were sitting outside on a picnic bench enjoying our yummy lobster rolls. The water changed directions as we sat there. This is an 11-foot tide. And we marveled at the way it could flow uphill. We made it back okay because that was perfectly timed too. On that same trip, we decided to have an after-dinner visit around a fire. We built a small fire pit by the water and were having a great conversation. The sun was setting and it was getting dark. Then we hear a hissing sound, and it was the incoming tide putting out our fire. Time to move. We had many delicious dinners with the Sobols at their homes on Toulouse Street, South Rendon, Bayou Liberty, and in Sebastopol. We traveled to San Francisco to see them, and they joined us on a blues cruise to the Caribbean in 1994. Richard was such a gentleman, so intelligent, hardworking, and such a calm spirit. I really admire and respect both Richard and Annie. They were gracious hosts and both so eloquent. I always felt enriched after spending time with them. Okay, stick together. Here are some of the traits I remember. Richard was an athlete, a runner, and a swimmer. He loved nature and the outdoors and took frequent hikes. He could play piano. I didn't get to hear him very often, but I knew he could play. He knew how to right the wrongs that came before him and worked very hard against the odds, the unjust things in our country. He was an activist, but also a pacifist. The walk softly and carry a big stick type. However, Richard's big stick was his words, spoken so calmly in his velvety voice. He was brave when confronted and determined to win justice for the underprivileged and wrongly accused. I miss Richard, his kind heart and lovely smile. True friends are an amazing gift in life, and I'm so filled with love. Okay. One more. Here's my next page. And admiration for the friendship of Richard and Ann, here, now, and forever after. In closing, I'd like to say that one of my favorite songs of all time is Ebony and Ivory by Stevie Wonder and Paul McCartney. If only everyone would remember their words. Ebony and Ivory live together in perfect harmony, side by side on my piano keyboard. Oh Lord, why don't we? We all know that people are the same wherever you go. There's good and bad in everyone. Learn to live, learn to give each other what we need to survive, together alive. Ebony and Ivory live together in perfect harmony, side by side on my piano keyboard. Oh Lord, why don't we? Thank you all for coming, and God bless us all.
I'll be reading another Bible scripture. It's gonna be coming out of Psalm 13 from 1 to 13. I speak in tongues of men or of angels, but if I am without love, I'm a sounding gong and a clinging cymbal. Love is patient, love is kind, and envy no one. Love is never boastful, nor conceited, nor rude, does not go over other men's sin, but delight in the truth. There are three things that last forever: faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love. I have a little bit more to say about Mr. Sobol. He was a King David, a warrior. He was a warrior. Mr. Sobol didn't back down from anything, and anything that came before him, he pursued it. He was no one to brag. Y'all heard people talk about him earlier, not too much more that I can say about him, but he was a great man. He was not a bragger. He was a man that had great love for everybody, and he helped everybody. And he meant good for the country and the people of this country. Mr. Sobol handled not only Duncan versus Louisiana, but he handled a few other cases for me. Him and Ann handled one. And I lost a boat, one of my boats my father gave me, that was my living. And a lot of people told me, oh, well, this company is bankrupt. You know, you're not gonna get anything. I called Mr. Sobol and I talked with Mr. Sobol. I told him about this. He said, well, somebody gonna buy your boat. He said, the Coast Guard, the Corps of Engineers, the state of Louisiana, somebody gonna buy your boat. And he said, and he took the case. He said, don't worry about paying me. He said, if we get something, then I'm gonna get paid, but if we don't, he said, I want you with a boat. And I thank God for that. We had a little struggle with Brockman. Brockman, was it? Brockman, you know, and he kind of got under Mr. Sobol's skin, and Mr. Sobol, he told me, he said, well, he said, I'm gonna get him this board. But Mr. Sobol was a smart man. He was patient. The scriptures I read about it, the two scriptures, that was Mr. Sobol. And he was a patient man. But on the end of the deal, I got my boat. And Mr. Sobol was just, I can't explain what kind of man he was, because I loved him so much. I loved him more than you, Ms. Barbara. His family. And I think about him a lot. he's a household name in my family. And like I said, he was a David, a King David. He was a warrior, and he didn't take no concern about himself. It was all about other people. And that's why I wish we would have a lot more Sobels. And on the end of the scripture, it said the greatest of all is love. And Mr. Sobel had love, great love. He had love for everyone. And he showed his love. He put himself out on the front line. So, you know, he gave up everything for other people. And that was great love. Thank y'all.
I think we have time for one or two quick remembrances if someone wants to step forward. And I just ask you keep it to 2 minutes or so, just so that a few people can speak and introduce yourself when you step up. Thank you.
I'm David McBurnett. I was Al's roommate when Richard would come over and hang out, and Al came back from law school one day. He said, "Is that Richard Sobol? Is like a lawyer?" I'm like, "Yeah." He said, "I'm studying him at law school, you know." And I met Richard about 1970, 71. My earliest memories is we took apart his BSA motorcycle in the courtyard of the apartment he and Andy were living in. I remember Andy looking down on us from the balcony going, "Is it ever going to run?" But it did. I mean, everybody talks about a lot of legal work Richard did, which he did a tremendous amount. But I'll tell you one, face to face with a very heavy duty authority, Richard was fierce. I had sued, along with 30 other people, sued Nixon and Laird for treason and murder for non-constitutional warfare, which the federal government didn't like very much. And in fact, the Secret Service was pursuing me around the country. I didn't know that till I was out of town. And I knew I did not want to face those people without attorney. And I'd called ACLU in New York and they shined me on. I'm like, okay. And I stayed underground until I got back to New Orleans and landed in Richard's office. And Richard called them. And they said, "Well, bring him down here." He said, "No, you want to speak to my client, come here," which they did. And they had construed that I had said we were taking Nixon out of office and somehow that would be violent. And Richard sat there looking at him, and Richard was so clean and fierce. He said, "You were aware of the federal lawsuit to take Nixon out of office?" "Yes, we are." "Well, is there anything else we need to say here?" They apologized and left. And I was like, damn, what a good lawyer. You know, I mean, lots of stuff in the courtroom, but face to face with those men with short hair and shiny black shoes wearing big guns is really interesting. I remember when V and I took him fishing to Plaquemine Parish, first time he went down there, since you had that little encounter where he didn't really tell the story, but Judge Perez wanted to kill both Duncan and Richard. And the federal government kind of came in and stopped that from happening. So we took him fishing down there years later, V and I and some other guys. And Richard was like a cat in a tile bathroom, man. He was nervous. And we're like, he knew it was all right, but it was still PTSD from that, which I understand, you know. But Richard also, I mean, I remember we did a lot of stuff on his place in Bayou Liberty, and my son and him were very, very close. My son will carry his name, and my granddaughters carry his name. But one of my fondest memories, we did a lot of stuff out there with Annie and Richard's place, but I came out one day, and it had been after a hurricane. We cleaned everything up, and Richard had got himself a little backhoe, you know, one of those Bobcat backhoes, you know, and he had got that thing. He was just doing great with it. And he's got his baseball hat on. I never saw him with a baseball hat before or since. He's got his leather gloves and he's got the backhoe, and he's like, "I'm really good at this. I want to go to backhoe competitions." And I just kind of looked at him. I didn't have to say that he needed to keep his day job, but you know, but Richard loved doing that stuff. I mean, he was a great lawyer who changed a lot of the world in law, but he also was a really fun dude. He loved the water, he loved the fish, he loved people. We had a lot of fun with him, and he's still right here with me, always. Thank you.
Is there anybody, do we have Eddie on Zoom? I'm sorry. Yeah, yes, I think we have somebody hopefully joining us on Zoom, Angela Bell.
I am here. Good morning to everyone. Thornton Wilder once said, "The highest tribute to the dead is not grief, but gratitude." I come bearing words of gratitude today. As did Richard, I teach constitutional law, and Louisiana's history is so rich, I often search for local cases to assign to my students. A standing lesson led me to an employment discrimination case that Richard had litigated. I assigned it to my law students and had one of the most impactful lectures of my career. While working on an issue of juror underrepresentation, I found Richard's footprint there too. My work in ending Louisiana's non-unanimous jury system led me back again to Richard. I've since read most of the cases he litigated in Louisiana, and I have concluded that his imprint is indelibly woven into the fabric of Louisiana. I regret never knowing Richard, but will be forever grateful for the lesson plans that he unknowingly left to me. As for the brand of lawyering that he wrapped and put a bow on so that I could train future lawyers, what emerges from that laboratory of lessons is a profile of a man who can appropriately be labeled an extremist, the kind that Dr. Martin Luther King spoke of in his letter from the Birmingham jail. Dr. King said he actually gained a measure of satisfaction from having that label directed at him. Dr. King asked, was Jesus not an extremist for love? Was Amos an extremist for justice? So the question, Dr. King says, is not whether we will be extremists, but what kind of extremists will we be? We will be extremists for hate, or will we be extremists for love? Will we be extremists for the preservation of injustice or for the extension of justice? It is clear from Richard's work that he was an extremist for love and an extremist for the extension of justice. He understood anti-racism before the term became in vogue. He understood how to disarm Southern courts and how to capitalize on the power of the federal courts. His love for humanity is etched into the prolific body of work. The pursuit of equal justice took him on long journeys. He never declared his arrival at his destination until full rights were won. Half or even some was not good enough for Richard. He was a long distance runner, a revolutionary. I offer my highest tribute and my profound gratitude for both the lessons and the example. And thank you for allowing me this moment to share.
Carol.
Thank you. I think I'm up next. My name is Stephen Liss, with Carol Chomsky, my wife. Everything's been so moving this morning to hear the tributes to Richard. I had the great fortune to work for Richard and Mike Trister, and yes, there really was a Mike Trister, as a law student and associate at Sobol and Trister in the early 1980s. Now, 3 minutes is just, can't begin to scratch the surface of everything I learned from Richard and Mike. Those many lessons that had guided me throughout my career in public law. I learned about keeping cool under pressure. There was the time I was with Richard in an elevator with our client, and suddenly our client pulled out a gun. He was absolutely convinced that the defendant was going to have him killed. Fortunately, by the time we reached the top floor, Richard, in his calm but firm manner, convinced the client to put the gun away, leave the coat in the coat closet, and the deposition went off without incident. But what I learned most from Richard was that the practice of law was not about the law itself, but about the people we were there to serve. and about how to achieve justice for those people. Richard taught me the most important section of any brief was the statement of facts, where you could tell the story of the people behind the case. After reading the story, the judge would understand where justice would be served. Now, as my last week in law school was coming up, and Richard gave me a choice, either go to class or join him for a week in New Orleans to help him try the case against Kaiser Aluminum that Mr. Douglas discussed earlier. Richard and Niels and Annie had managed to get the case reinstated after it was languishing in the courts for years. We spent several days in court, including one very bleary morning after I spent the night on a riverboat listening to Dr. John and the Neville brothers. It was Jazz Fest, and Richard insisted that I went. But my real education came in the days before. We drove the lower 9th Ward with Mr. Parsons, the named plaintiff, going house to house and hearing the stories of individual class members. That's what the case was about. I remember those stories when we were finally able to send out settlement checks several years later. In some cases, unfortunately, it was justice denied as those individuals had passed away in the interim. But achieving that $3.5 million settlement was just a tribute to Richard and Niels and Annie and their perseverance in the pursuit of justice. Now, I was glad I was able to connect with Richard and with Mike in recent years to tell them both how much my time with them meant to me, both as a person and as a lawyer. I learned I could be reasonable, soft-spoken, and yet effective, that I didn't need to be an SOB to be a warrior, that facts and reason will ultimately prevail, and that the law and lawyers must be a force for justice. Most of all, they reminded me why we practice law in the first place. For that, I am eternally grateful.
Time for one. Groovy. I think we have time for one more if anybody feels moved to speak. Well, on behalf of everybody who helped set this up, I want to thank everyone for coming to this remembrance for Richard Sobol. This has been, I came late into Richard's life when I started working on my book, but hearing what everybody has said today has, I think, only deepened my respect for the man. Thank you all very much. And that concludes this portion of the service.
On behalf of the Rhodes family and the entire staff, we would like to thank the family for allowing us to serve you. We do hope our services has been satisfactory. We want to thank the leaders up here and everyone that has spoken in reference to King Richard Berry Sobol. To God be the glory for the things that he has done. This now concludes our memorial service. Thank you.
Henri, got 951-488-7250. All right, talk to you.